And all right, you should see the NASA meatball. So this is a picture from Mission Control. We've got a couple different rooms here in Houston at Johnson Space Center. And this is a shot from behind the flight director console. That's Paul Kanya, who's in control of Artemis 1 in this photo. And so Paul's background, he used to be a part of the Department of Defense, and he flew spacecraft missions for them. To his left is one of my classmates who also got selected at the same time as me. That's Nicole McElroy. And she has an interesting background in that she used to be the launch director for a commercial company that was delivering satellites to orbit. So it's a company that was called Virgin Orbit, and they used to launch satellites from the wing of an airplane. It was a really fantastic idea, and she's bringing a lot of great ideas to NASA. But beyond them, you can see all the other desks, and they've got, some of them are words. You can make out control on the right side of the screen there. Some of them are, of course, acronyms, because we love our acronyms here at NASA. You can see FIDO kind of over the corner, and GNC. And really what each of these are different experts. And so the structure of mission control has been largely the same since Chris Kraft really codified it as a part of the Gemini and Mercury missions. So the very first time we were putting Americans in space, Chris Kraft came up with this idea, and he was really the first flight director. And his idea was, all right, in order to do something as dynamic as space flight and to do it reliably safe such that we can trust the humans we're putting on board are going to come back home at the end of it, it's got to be a pretty precise structure. And in his mind, it was kind of broken down like this. There are many different experts in the room. Our teams right now are somewhere in the region of, when we're at our smallest, around 5, to when we're at our largest, around a dozen. And all of them are going to have deep expertise in some topic. They're going to study for years to prepare for that moment. And really their purpose is to feed information to the flight director. The saying goes that the flight director, to do their job, all I need is a headset and a stopwatch. And the reason behind that is because I'm not really an expert in anything. I'm relying on the experts in the room to provide me the information that I need to make decisions, because my role in the room is making decisions. It's really about weighing the risks and making sure that we're progressing to accomplish the mission. And of course, the headset piece is the fact that a lot of this conversation is pretty fast paced, and email IM is just isn't fast enough. It's a lot easier to talk on the loops. A fun fact about most flight controllers, so you can see the headsets in their ears, those allow us to listen to about 20 conversations at once. So it's my favorite party trick that you really can never forget. Anytime after I became a flight controller, if I was at a restaurant, if I was at a bar, it's not really a skill you can turn off. So you tend to just listen to all the conversations around you. And yeah, it's an interesting quirk of life in mission control, moving outside of work. So let me be a little more specific about what's going on in this photo, because we're going to circle back to this part. This photo was taken during Artemis 1, which was our most recent test flight that's checking out a lot of the hardware that we're planning to use to return to the moon and stay on the moon. So the idea is to have a sustaining presence. And you can see in kind of the right corner of this image, the NASA worm logo in red. And so that was a live view from the spacecraft looking back, and you can see two much smaller dots, a gray one that's the moon. So the larger circle is the moon, and the smaller one beside it, that tiny blue marble, is Earth. So this is one of the moments where we were furthest away from the Earth. And we've taken this Orion spacecraft that at this point we didn't have any astronauts on board because we wanted to check out the systems, but we put it further and faster than any other human-rated spacecraft has ever gone, because that's our next step, right? Our goal here is to continue exploring further and farther. So Artemis 1 was an extremely important step in enabling that. But like I mentioned earlier, the majority of my work is spent flying the International Space Station. So we've got a team in Mission Control that is staffed 24/7 because we have astronauts on board the International Space Station 24/7. We've had a continuous human presence in space for the past about 25 years. So this is a good graphic that just kind of gives you an idea of what the space station is. Laid out on a football field basically takes up the whole thing. Looking at the arrays that stretch sideline to sideline, that's what gives us our power. So while the space station is circling the Earth, making a lap every about 90 minutes, we rely on those solar arrays to charge our batteries for the short periods where the Earth is between station and the sun. The habitable volume, so the area where the crew lives and works, is more in the center here, again, stretching kind of sideline to sideline. And even though it looks dwarfed in this image, the internal volume that the astronauts live in is equivalent to about a 4-bedroom house. So it's quite a lot of space. It's mainly laid out in one long hallway, which has its own particular challenges. We have crew rotations. We'll have about 4 crew members that do about 6-month stints on the station. So not only is this 4-bedroom house hosting somewhere between 9 to 12 people at a time, but it's also turning over roommates every couple months. So believe it or not, one of the main things we do to help in Houston is just track where stuff is. Because as you can imagine, if you've ever shared a house with other people, that it gets pretty easy to lose things. So that's one of the experts that we have in Mission Control is a stowage officer. And they try to keep track of where things are while we guide the astronauts through the maintenance tasks that they need to do to keep their station safe to live in, as well as science. Really, science is our goal. I'll touch on science in a little bit more, but to give you a real picture of the International Space Station, this also has shuttle attached to the front of it, which was really a key enabler of the space station, was having the space shuttle in order to assemble the space station, right? An object as big as a football field, you can't launch that in a rocket. So this came up piece by piece. And for the majority of the US segment, which also includes a module that was built by the European Space Agency and the Japanese Space Agency, all of those were delivered in the payload bay of the shuttle. The other half of this space station, the Russian segment, kind of flew itself there. So their method, because they didn't have a space shuttle, was more along the lines of each module being in its own individual spacecraft and then meeting up in orbit kind of one at a time. In truth, it's one of the strengths of the space station having 2 different techniques. I think it gives us the ability to have humans on board for as long as we can, because we both have sort of different engineering mindsets. And so it's unlikely that we've both run into the same error. We've had plenty of failures over the life of space station, and that's really the days that Mission Control shows its value, is learning and quickly responding whenever there's a failure. This is a shot that just I love because of the strange perspective it is to be in space. It is a privilege when I go into work in Mission Control to be able to, I have to pinch myself every once in a while to realize that my day-to-day job is to get to work with high achieving individuals like these astronauts here, but also just the crazy environment that is the space station. So I mentioned that it does a lap around Earth every 90 minutes. So they get a sunset. They get about 16 sunsets a day and sunrises. And beyond, you can see them hanging upside down, right? Because of this microgravity environment. That's what makes the laboratory that is the International Space Station unique, is that environment. And really, this picture also shows one of the main experiments we have on the International Space Station, which is the astronauts themselves. We've learned a ton over the past 25 years of how does humanity live and thrive in space, because it's a totally different environment. I think just two quick things about how the human body can change. A couple of these people, if you saw their picture on Earth versus this picture here while they're on orbit, you would note that they look a little puffy in the face while they're at space station. So here on Earth, because of the gravity, the presence of gravity, we have a lot of fluid that hangs out in our legs. It's just kind of natural where the human body lets that fluid go. And of course, we have systems to move it around. But those systems are kind of tailored to having gravity in effect. So when you're on the space station, that fluid migrates. And so a lot of it actually ends up kind of evenly distributed, which puts a lot more of it in your head or face. And it's something that we have researched over the past 20 years about, because one of the concerns is the distribution of fluid can start to press on your eyeball, and any distortion to your eyeball distorts your vision. So it's something that we have utilized the space station for the past 20 years to try to come up with ways that we can prevent this effect, knowing that our ultimate goal is something like Mars, or even further, Europa, a moon, moons of Jupiter, moons of Saturn, where we're going to have humans in space potentially for a year before they even get to their destination. And how do we make sure that they are ready to perform when they reach their destination? Another big thing is exercise, right? We have the advantage of anytime we walk around here or even move around in any way here on Earth, that we're combating gravity. So that works out our muscles. It drives the density in our bones. The astronauts, again, this microgravity environment causes the bones and the muscles to atrophy, right? So it starts to remove, without that resistance, your body starts to distribute those resources differently. So in a normal crew work day, they'll have about 2 hours of exercise every single day to try to combat this. And we've long relied on things like a treadmill or a cycling machine, right? Things that on Earth you can implement in a very similar method on the space station. Of course, with the treadmill, they have to wear bungee cords that keeps them attached. But one of the more impressive things that we've accomplished in the past couple of years is by utilizing a machine that looks like anything you'd see in a gym here on Earth, but kind of all in one package. So it has a bench press and the ability to do squats. And with that, we've actually been able to have astronauts return from a 6-month stay on station stronger than when they left. So that's just one example of, or two examples of things we're utilizing the space station for. It of course has a unique perspective as well. So this view is from the cupola, and the cupola is, as you can tell, just kind of a room of windows that in the normal attitude of station, the normal way that we have station pointed as it rolls around the Earth, is facing towards the Earth. So it's one of our astronauts' favorite activities is to take pictures of the Earth. And it's also critical science, right? So we're able to, by orbiting the Earth for this long duration period, able to gather a ton of data about how are our oceans doing, how healthy are our forests. That sort of adds into the many satellites that we have around Earth that are trying to keep tabs on how healthy is our planet. One of the things that astronauts talk about as a really transformative experience when they get to the space station is looking out and seeing that thin blue band that's over the horizon. That is just that small atmosphere that makes our planet habitable. And from up there, they say it looks a lot more fragile. So that's one of the important things we're utilizing the space station for, is to monitor the health of the Earth. We also get some gorgeous pictures like this one where we're headed towards the solar maximum. The sun's very energetic right now. And whenever it gives off a particular burst of energy, here on Earth, we can see the northern lights. Well, you get an even better view from station. So how do we keep space station going for this amount of time, right? We We've tried for the past 20 years and done a great job of closing what we call the environmental systems loop. So us humans, we need water, we need food, we need air to breathe. And we've managed via a series of different hardwares to reclaim about 98% of the water that goes up on board. So to make that a little more plain, today's coffee on the International Space Station is also tomorrow's coffee. So if you catch my drift, the human sweat and urine is all collected, and we have an intense distilling process to, of course, make it safe to once again consume. But that's one of the things that we see as important to be able to move humanity out further into the stars. But we do still need cargo, right? We have to send food up. We are working on trying to grow some plants on board, but right now they're not, proficient enough to really provide a consistent food source. So what we've done of late is worked with commercial companies in order to make best use of your taxpayer dollars and keep the space station going as long as we can and have it be as efficient as possible. So this picture here is a Falcon 9 rocket, so SpaceX rocket, with at the top there a cargo dragon. And what that will bring up is new experiments, new science. I talked mainly before about the human-based science we're doing. But really, the National Lab also allows us to do some pretty amazing fundamental physics science as well. Some of the most recent, I'll just tell one story. One of the big things we've realized in microgravity is that you can develop very precise pharmaceuticals. So it's very important for that, the effectivity of a drug we might take to be developed in a perfect kind of structure. And having less forces, removing gravity from the equation, can help us learn and create better medicine. So a personal example, some of the research on board the International Space Station led to the development of a drug called Keytruda, which is a drug that utilizes our immune systems to fight cancer cells. And in the past year, my father used Keytruda to beat skin cancer. So that is just kind of a single example of something that I'm really proud of that the space station was able to provide and was very obviously important to me. This is a picture of the Japanese cargo vehicle. So I mentioned earlier about kind of how international of an effort this is. The Japanese and the Europeans have supplied a module. They also supply cargo vehicles, really as a joint venture, which I find very rewarding on any given day in mission control. I'll be talking to folks in Munich. I'll be talking to folks in Tokyo. I'll be talking to folks in Moscow. This is one other, a last photo here of astronauts' other favorite thing to do, which is to go EVA, so or extravehicular activities. So you see this astronaut here basically in that recognizable white suit that is their personal spacecraft. And they are handymen as well, right? So we've utilized their skills outside to continually upgrade station. And that's one of the ways that we keep it flying. All right, so now to circle back about kind of where we're going from here. So this is a photo of Artemis 1 before it launched. The Space Launch System that you see here is the world's most powerful rocket that has delivered a payload to orbit. I'm caveating that because there's soon to be a very exciting thing with SpaceX's latest plan with their largest booster, which is part of our plan to return to the moon. But in Artemis 1, this is a kind of a close-up of that photo I had earlier in mission control here that gives you a little clearer view of what we accomplished on Artemis 1. We also got pretty darn close to the moon, and you can see some of the features that we're planning to go see. So our plan when we're returning to the moon is to land at the South Pole. That was deliberate. The Apollo missions were mainly equatorial. So in that band kind of in the center of the moon is where the majority of, or really all the Apollo landing sites are. And we're specifically going to the South Pole because we believe there is significant presence of water ice there. So in a crater on the South Pole, you can get some that really never, there's portions of the crater that never see the sunlight. And the hypothesis that's been backed up by some robotic spacecraft that visited the moon is that there's trapped in the soil is significant water. And that's important because obviously we can distill that and use it to support humans, but water can also be a pretty powerful energy source. So you can use electrolysis to split water. And from that, you get hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen that you can go breathe, and then hydrogen that you can use to fuel your rocket to get home, or perhaps go further into the solar system. This is the last picture from Artemis 1 that really drives home why we didn't have crew members on board for the first time. When Orion returned, it experienced heat around the order of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit as it plunged through the atmosphere. So we wanted to make sure that we had the heat shield that would keep the astronauts safe, and the parachute system checked out in a realistic environment before we put our Artemis 2 crews on it. So this is a picture of the 4 crew members that are going to be flying on Artemis 2. They'll be on that Orion spacecraft on a similar space launch vehicle rocket. They're going to go out and do a lap around the moon and come back. So we don't yet have a lander ready for this launch. And really, we wanted to put humans on board first, but not yet land on the moon, recognizing that when you go out to the moon, it can be as long as 5 days to return. So you need to be confident that your vehicle is going to be able to do that in a contingency, especially, and then if you're going to go land on the surface of the moon, it's going to be even longer. So this is our selected crew for Artemis 2, kind of starting on the left here, Christina Koch. At the bottom, Reed Weissman is the commander of the mission. Christina is one of the mission specialists. Jeremy Hansen on the right is a Canadian astronaut, and he's another one of the mission specialists. And then at the top there, Victor Glover is one of the pilots. So Reed and Victor will share the piloting responsibilities. I realize I'm going pretty deep in here, but this just kind of gives you some numbers as to why we're moving methodically, utilizing our space station experience, targeting a return to the moon to get self-sufficient and understand how to really support humans a little bit further away before we take what I'm really looking forward to, an extremely important step to go visit a whole nother planet in Mars. So these are some pictures, and I'll try to kind of move through these kind of quickly so that we can leave time for questions. But we have several vehicles that are going to help us return to the moon. All of this kind of gets talked about under the umbrella of Artemis missions. That's kind of our name for our exploration that we're going on. This picture here shows the Gateway, which you can kind of think is similar to the space station. It's going to be in a pretty far out orbit from the moon. So it's going to be circling the moon, but pretty far away. And one of the advantages there too is it kind of acts like a train station. So it's shown pictured here with Orion on the right. And there's actually kind of a mocked up lander attached on the bottom here. The idea is this would be where Orion comes and a lander arrives and the crew's able to transfer. And this is one of the ways that we're trying to achieve real sustainability that we could not reach with the Apollo architecture. The reality of the Apollo architecture was it couldn't really be expanded upon in order to realize something like a moon base. So this is kind of our critical train station that makes it logistically possible to go to the surface of the moon. So this picture shows SpaceX and their human landing system. So they were awarded the first contract. We had realized the value in our space station partnership with the commercial economy, that they were able to deliver things at an incredible cost point, but also do some pretty innovative things. SpaceX is notable for the people shown there on the surface are to size. So if you can squint and see at the very bottom next to the American flag that's planted in the soil, that's actually how tall their human landing system is. And their plan is to ultimately use this same vehicle to go to Mars as well. So recently, we also awarded a contract to a company called Blue Origin to also develop their own landing system. So this is similar. We undertook a similar process with Space Station with trying to have multiple companies. That competition really helps, as well as those options. And you can see very dissimilar designs as well. So I believe that that's another strength of this idea of having kind of two different people coming at it with slightly different solutions here. All right, now thinking even further. So this is really probably many missions down the line. This is more at the later part of the decade, if not leading into the 2030s, where we really start to build Artemis Base Camp. And you can see habitats and rovers, and the idea here really built around in situ resource utilization, which is just a fancy term of, if you imagine any explorer just using what you got, right? So we're looking at how do we use the lunar soil to make structures, to make perhaps habitats themselves? How do we utilize the water ice we found, like I discussed earlier, to give us water and oxygen to breathe and hydrogen to fuel rockets? And of course, all of this then leads on even further. Our idea here is that if we can find a solution that is a sustainable moon presence, and there's no reason we can't go extend this to Mars. And a lot of the things that we're doing on the moon, we're specifically doing with an eye towards Mars. All right, I talked a good while there, but hopefully you all have some good questions. I'm happy to talk about anything in my background, anything about human spaceflight. As you kind of gleaned from this talk, my job as a NASA flight director is controlling the missions that have to do with human spaceflight. So anything that has to do with the astronauts, I'm happy to talk about.